What's poppin', and welcome back to another episode of Fletcher the Fisherman, guys. Today we're going over my top 5 tips for bank anglers or pond anglers, and we're just gonna kind of go over lure selection first and kind of talk about how I go through that process, and then I'm actually going to put a GoPro on and we're gonna go walk across this pond, kind of pick it apart piece by piece and tell y'all exactly how I approach different scenarios, where I cast, why I cast there, how I cast there, and we're just gonna get into all those little nitty-gritty details. But let's go ahead and start talking about lure selection. When it comes to lure selection, I like to start with moving baits, whether that is top water or moving baits that are actually submerged. So typically for me, I like to start with submerged baits. I just feel like I get a little bit more consistent bites on them, and it gives me a better feel for how the fish are gonna be reacting on a specific given day a little bit quicker. So for me, I like to throw baits that don't have treble hooks. Treble hooks can cause all kinds of problems in a pond when you're fishing from the bank. When you cast out there, you don't really have the ability to go get something if it gets snagged. Your only options are waiting out there, which I figure most of y'all probably won't do unless it's a really expensive bait, or if you can actually get to that by like walking around and trying to pull it out from the backside. So I like to throw things that are just not super likely to get hung up, and it saves me money and time when I'm actually trying to fish. So I like to throw things that are either weedless or just have a big open hook. So far as things that aren't completely weedless but are great pond options are stuff like a spinnerbait or a chatterbait. These are pretty complementary baits. They're pretty similar in style, but one of them has some advantages that the other doesn't, and vice versa. So when it comes to a spinnerbait, you have this wire. This wire acts as a great weed guard when coming through cover. So a spinnerbait is much more suited for coming through timber, any kind of laydowns or stuff like that, where you're actually gonna have to worry about that bait getting snagged up more often. So that is where I will definitely throw a spinnerbait over a chatterbait. But a chatterbait is great around rocks, and you can fish it a little bit easier. It doesn't have so much drag in the water. It doesn't just wear your hands out as much, but it also gets just smacked by fish. So this is a really great bait to just throw around rocks or open water situations. If I'm not throwing one of those two, another great option is just a little paddle tail rigged with a Texas rig swim bait hook, and this is like, I believe, like a 4.5 or a 5-inch little swim bait right here, and this thing is awesome. You can throw it through anything. It's not going to get hung up 99.9% of the time, and fish really love this and they eat it like crazy, and they're not expensive, so you can get some really good use out of them. The last option I want to talk about that I use a lot is one that kind of falls into 2 categories. It's kind of a moving bait, and you can also fish it slow on the bottom or close to the bottom, and that is just a soft plastic jerk bait. This is a great bait that you can cover water quickly with, and you can fish it in a variety of ways. You can fish it super slow, almost crawl it, barely twitch it, just let it fall all the way to the bottom, or you can pop it really fast and make it super erratic, and you can get strikes and reactions both ways from a little soft plastic jerk bait like that. And then if I'm not throwing submerged moving baits, I like to throw topwater. Everybody loves topwater. It's a ton of fun, especially in ponds where you can have that opportunity to catch some huge fish, maybe that fish of a lifetime, and it doesn't get any better than catching that fish on topwater. So far as baits go to cover water quickly with, I like 2 style baits, and that is either a buzz bait or a buzz frog or a plopping style bait. These are pretty simple. Almost anybody can fish them effectively. You just cast them out and you reel and you cover water fast. And you can slow a whopper plopper down a little bit more where you can't a buzz bait. So this can be a little bit more versatile in some situations, but both of them are awesome options, and they both get awesome strikes. If you have something that you want to slow down a little bit more and target things more specifically with, a frog is a great way to do that, especially if you have some matted stuff or need to throw it where you literally can't throw those because there's weeds and stuff. A frog's a great option. Or you can throw a walking bait in open water scenarios or around laydowns and things that you really want to kind of take your time and work that bait a little bit slower. And you can also work this thing in open water great, and fish will come up and hammer it. So if I'm not getting any kinds of bites on those 2 style baits, then it is time to slow down. I almost never start with bottom baits just because I want to try to cover as much water as I can, as fast as I can, and see if I can get these fish to react and figure them out as fast as possible. So like I said, if none of that's working, I'll move over to bottom baits. And the bottom baits that excel for me when it comes to pond fishing, you can't beat a wacky rig. A wacky rig just does work. Fish hammer it, whether it's a lake, a pond, a river, a creek, whatever it might be. Wacky rigs are super effective. Or a Texas rigged creature bait or a worm or something like that. I typically will throw a 1/4 ounce with either like a 3 or a 4/0 hook, just depending on the style of bait, but some kind of creature bait, crawl, worm is so super effective. You just can't go wrong with it. Everyone should have that in their tackle box if they're going to do some pond fishing. Another option that I really like a lot is also a Ned rig. I don't have one with me right now, but I'm sure a lot of y'all know what that is. So a Ned rig is also something I would highly suggest throwing, and that's just when you just don't have any luck on the top water or the, you know, the submerged moving baits. That's kind of when I switch to those. But far as actually approaching the pond, I want to go ahead and put the GoPro on now. So let me go ahead and do that, and we will get out here and I will show y'all exactly how I break down a pond step by step. Let's grab the rods and let's jump into this, guys. So when it comes to pond fishing, I like to start at the dam end, because over like the last 15 to 18 years of pond fishing experience, that is where I've caught the most big fish. That's where I've caught the most fish in general. And the reason for that is because at the dam end, these fish can go between shallow water and the deepest water as fast as possible, because that is where the deepest water is located, at the dam end. And these fish are trying to regulate their body temperature, going in between shade spots, going in between different water depths, and this area of the pond allows them to do that the most effectively. What you'll find as the farther away you get from the dam end of a pond, the bottom just becomes pretty consistent. It usually, not much deeper than like 5 to 8 feet, and pretty much is all looks the same. Most ponds are bowl shaped, so just getting in that area where they can actually get in that deepest water, which really isn't that deep in most ponds, it definitely makes a difference for these fish. So what I like to do when I actually start casting is fan casting. So I'll take that first cast, go right down the bank line, and I'll reel that thing all the way in. And if I don't have any luck with that, then I will take my next cast about 5 to 10 feet farther out than my previous cast. So just a little bit farther out and work it back. And I'm gonna do that all the way around until I've worked my way all the way to the far side edge that I didn't start on. So like that cast there, then the next one there, the next one there, the next one there, next one there. And then that last cast is gonna go down that bank. If I don't have any luck, I'm gonna walk about 75% of the distance that I made that last cast and start doing the same thing there. But I'm gonna approach it a little bit differently. So let me kind of like walk over here to where about 75% of my casting distance would be, which would say, let's say right about here, just because this is the easiest place to get down to, because all these reeds and stuff. I don't want to walk too far up to where I've already casted, because if I walk into a new area that I haven't got my bait to yet, a lot of these fish push up against the edge in the pond, and you don't want to spook anything that you haven't had a chance to cast to it yet. So I go about 75% of my casting distance when I'm working a bank, just because I don't want to spook anything off. And this time, instead of like starting to my left, I've already fished all this because I just fan casted in that area. I'm gonna start my fan cast over here. So make that full cast down the bank right there. Don't backlash like I just did. I gotta get this reel dialed in. But cast down that bank and then fan cast back to the area that you've already covered. So for me, I've already covered all that in a fan cast theoretically. So my last cast in this fan cast situation would maybe be about halfway, maybe slightly more than halfway, just to kind of come across something at a different angle. If there was something like specific out here, I would probably take a few like targeted casts at it from a different angle if I didn't have any luck from that first angle, because sometimes these fish will just like things coming from different angles. So unless there's that scenario, I'll only kind of work out to where I haven't casted. So let me go ahead and walk this way. So if I hadn't had any luck there, we're gonna try to get to the areas of the pond where most people just don't make the effort to get to. So as you can tell, when it comes to this pond, this whole side of the pond is pretty easy to fish. Like I'm in a suburban area right now. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people that live in this area. Tons of people fish this pond, but so you want to get to the areas that people just don't get to. So for this scenario, this whole side is just covered in trees. You got to really grind your way through these trees to get into these spots. And what I've found, not only is there more cover and lay down for these fish on the bank on this side, just people just don't get over there and fish it. So these fish aren't as pressured on that side of the pond, and that's where you'll find a lot of your fish. So that tip of just trying to get into the thickest, deepest areas where most anglers don't make the effort to go can really make a difference when you're trying to pond fish. Find a little path back here. I mean, this area is definitely fish, but a lot less heavily than the other side, I can assure you that. So Let me work my way back here to something that I want to talk about right here. So this is a great example. This is an area where I probably won't throw a moving bait. It's something that's a little bit more targeted and specific. So let me go ahead and grab this frog. But what I want to talk about is not getting too close to the bank. Say I wanted to fish that little nook where that log is coming in. That spot looks pretty fishy. I don't want to spook anything that's there. So what I like to do is stand as far away as possible where I can still make a good cast on that spot. So I don't want to walk right up on the bank exactly in front of that spot because there could be a fish sitting right there. I'll try to work myself as far off of that spot as I can. I'm standing like 20, 30 feet away from the edge of that bank, and I'm gonna try to make a cast from back here and see if I can't get in there. So now that I'm in there, I'm gonna work that frog in that specific spot. So just staying off of really like targeted areas that there could be a specific fish like a laydown or anything like that is a great way to just get extra strikes, get more bites, get bigger bites, and not spook any fish in the process. There's one more thing that I want to talk about, guys, and let me just kind of work my way to an area where that kind of applies. Down here where there's a bunch of big laydowns hanging out down here. Here we go. This will work nicely for what I wanted to talk about. Let me grab my rod here and let's jump into this. So as you can tell, there's a laydown right here in front of me that's jutting out. If you want to cast on this, like you think there's a fish somewhere up in those branches, what you do not want to do is come right over to this laydown. It might be instinctive to do this and cast straight out from it this direction, because if you were to cast out at this direction, what a tree does when it falls in the water, all those branches are going that way. They're forking out that direction. So when you're pulling your bait back through that tree, all you're gonna do is run that bait into the forks of branches, and it's gonna create a very high chance that that bait is just gonna get jammed in the fork of a tree somewhere up along the side of that thing. And that is just gonna be causing all kinds of problems for you. You're gonna lose a lot of baits and have a lot of headache from that scenario. So what you wanna do is get to the side of the laydown to the best of your ability and throw across sideways. That way you can kind of like work the whole angle of the tree. So, you know, work this little bit on the back end, reel it in after you kind of work all of that, cast a little bit farther out, work all the way back in, and you know, kind of do that all the way down the length of the tree, because I know it's instinctive where you can kind of sit there and cover the whole tree in one cast. This way you're minimizing the amount of branches that you're actually going to be able to get stuck on, which creates for just a better fishing experience, and it helps you pick apart a tree a little bit easier and just a little bit more mindfully to minimize your snagging and all that. Well, that about does it, guys. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. Hopefully y'all learned something. And if you're actually curious about any of the baits that I talked about in today's video, they will all be linked in the description below for you to check out. And if you have any further questions about what I was talking about today, just drop it down in the comments. But as always, guys, bassing is a passion. Peace.